Hey folks. Okay, I am going to do a really brief tutorial on how to submit a book manuscript. We had tried to do this morning, and there's a new plugin for Zoom to YouTube that I did not have installed, so I am doing it again. Also testing to make sure this connection works. So here we go. So I just finished editing a book with Harleen Anderson called Collaborative Dialogic Practices, and it's an amazing book. It's got 15 chapters with authors from around the world talking about how they use collaborative dialogical practices in all sorts of settings, from medical setting, education, research, business settings. Really phenomenal book. And we submitted our manuscript today. And a lot of people talk to me about writing books, and I thought it would just be fun to actually share how this book manuscript submission process actually looks like, how it works, and all that good stuff. Because this is now my 12th book manuscript I have submitted. It's always quite an experience. I do textbooks. So textbooks, you normally have like 78 files that you're sending in. So this one only had I think 19 files I had to send in. So much simpler and straightforward. But it is actually a real important process, and a lot of authors don't quite understand, because after you've spent 2-3 years writing a book, you're just like, please let me just send it to the publisher and get it off of my desk and off of my to-do list. But there's a lot involved with it. There's actually a bit of legal stuff you need to know about submitting a manuscript. So I just thought I would share this with you in case you've ever had it on your to-do list to actually write a book. So the first thing to know is that publishers provide authors with something called a author guidelines. I am publishing with Taylor and Francis, and so I specifically with their Routledge books. And so this set of author guidelines is actually a 56-page monograph. It's a small book in and of itself. And when you're writing a book, you really don't want to have to read any book not related to your subject, but it really is important. It is totally overwhelming if this is the first time you're doing a book. But you do need to engage these 56 pages of instructions. It really is important. So you'll see here, and the main reason is there are a lot of legal elements when you sign a book contract with a publisher. It's a nice long contract as well. But the author has a lot of legal responsibilities that most first-time authors don't actually realize is their responsibility. And I think two of the biggest ones are getting permissions to use any substantial amount of quoted material from another author. And certainly for any type of artwork or anything else that someone can claim ownership of. And this even can go down to, and there's actually a gray area for using all those great little quotes, that you find in books. Technically, people have rights to that, unless usually it's after 70 years, something that's been published, the copyright, is no longer an issue. But if it's less than 70 years old, you really need to clear all those permissions. And typically you have to spend money. And sometimes that's even true for certain types of quotes that you might use. So this is an academic book. So typically academics are allowed to quote each other because we weren't criticizing in this book, but normally we're debating academic terms. So academic works, there's a lot less money involved. And so typically that's less of an issue. As you get to more mass media, popular books, you certainly, the issue of getting permissions is much more important. Well, it's always important, but much more critical, because typically much of the academic works are allowed to quote each other. So it's certainly something to look at, and we're kind of defining what is fair dealing or fair use of someone else's work. So in the book that we submitted today, we had one piece of artwork. So we had to get a written signed permission to use that in our book. The other big thing to think about is libel. There's a whole, they got multiple pages in the set of instructions about how you talk about other people. You can be sued for that. So definitely think about that, and how, because you would need to defend yourself as an author against certain types of just talking poorly about others. May seem like it's really okay to do sometimes when you read the news, but as a book author, you really have to know the law, and really be careful about what you say, and where those things come in. So next, there's preparing the manuscript, and you can see this goes on for many, many pages. So looking at editorial style, there's this whole set of instructions here, almost 10 pages on how to hand them the file. And I'm going to show you how to do that, how to do your artwork. That gets its own whole section. And then kind of going into and describing your responsibilities as an author in the production process. So I'm not going to do too much more, but I am going to show you what they have. A beautiful table in here that kind of shows you what the production process actually looks like. So today was a big day that Harleen and I handed and submitted in the document to the publisher, which is like, I would say it's the second best day in my life as an author, because it's like off my plate. It's that huge sense of accomplishment. My other favorite day is when the concept comes and I see it like come together. And usually it's when I'm putting the table of contents together. I see it just everything lines up. That is for me the most beautiful moment. Harleen's is getting the phone call from the editor, saying she's got a contract. But you can all have your own favorite parts of writing a book. That's what makes it fun. So, but when you submit to the publisher, formally submit your manuscript, you cannot change the manuscript much after that. And that is in virtually every book contract you will ever see, because once you submit it for publication to the publisher, they go through this very complex, time-consuming and expensive process of taking a Word document or whatever word processor you use and turning it into a hardbound book. And any change the author makes costs money, delay, costs them time. And so you're extremely limited. Most of my book contracts allow you to change up to 10% max of the text, because it costs, after that, you as an author would have to pay the publisher's costs to edit after that. So when you submit, that's why I'm going to going over this today. You really got to make sure you get it right. So you submit it, they take the production begins on their end, and that's the process of taking the author's words and turning it into a physical and digital book. The first phase, after they begin the process and assign everyone to all the roles and all that stuff, is the copy editing. And this is where someone who knows the English language very, very well, at least if you're whatever language you're publishing in, and they go through and make sure the grammar is good, the punctuation is correct, the content flows and the headings are all consistent, and we follow APA style as the style for this particular book. And so the copy editor then sends all those back to, in this case, because it's an edited book, meaning Harleen and I are editors and we have different chapter authors for each chapter. We'll have, Harleen and I will look at it, and in most cases we will send it to the authors if there's any type of changes, to make sure that the changes that the copy editors put in make sense to the authors and are accurately representing their words and their intentions and the intended meanings. So we get that all done. And then after everyone's pretty happy with commas, grammar, everything there, it's really hard to change after this point, then it gets set off to the typesetter. And these are the folks who actually take the, in our case, Word documents, puts them into the new software that's going to make beautiful, pretty books that they will print from. So after that, as it goes from Word docs into the actual typesetting phase, the authors get back something called page proofs. And the page proofs are like, it is a PDF of what that page is going to look like when it's in the book, with the page number, the exact heading, the exact font, all the bells and whistles. So we get exactly, this is what is going to get printed are the page proofs. And those tend to be on PDFs. So they're really fun to make changes to. You've got to have Adobe Acrobat if you want to usually make those changes. So again, Harleen and I will get those. We'll go through them. We'll also send them to all of the chapter authors who get to go through them. And then we get all those back. And once we get to the page proofing portion, that's when the indexing, which is at the back of an academic book, there's an index that tells you, where to find, whatever topic might be covered in the book. So the indexing can finally begin because now you have page numbers of the final book. And I hate doing the indexing, so we do have to pay someone to do that for us because it's a lot of work. I did one index once for one book. In fact, it was the last book I did with Harleen. And I'm not doing another one. So, but you're more than welcome to do one should you decide to. It does save you some money. And then after that, we go to the final corrections, clean it all up, and send it off to be printed. And then meanwhile, from the very beginning, they do start, as you can see on the side here, working on the cover, and that design is happening just kind of all by itself. So that is what that all looks like. Typically, the fastest I've ever seen this happen is about 6 months. It can take up to a year, especially when you have longer books like a textbook. I do a lot of textbooks, and those can take quite a bit of time to get through this whole process because they tend to be much longer, more complicated documents to create. So that's the simple little process of publishing and the steps that happen after you submit it. But I also want to show you the important cover letter that you send in when you submit your book manuscript, okay? So actually, before I do that, I'm going to just quickly show you, if you've ever wondered what a book looks like in the author's computer. It looks like this. It is just a bunch of Word documents. Always want to organize them really, really well. I do it chapter, 0, 1, 2, 3. There's something in the beginning called front matter. At the back, it's called end matter. And that's the table of contents and the actual title sheet that gives them the title and the biographies and all that good stuff in the beginning. And you can see when a chapter has multiple parts, like our chapter 9, you can see here has a artwork in it and the artwork permissions. So I put the 9.1, 9.2. When I do textbooks, most chapters have like 0.1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in them. And I get up to 78 different Word documents that get put into a book. So that's actually what it looks like. And you definitely want to make sure you have the right version of all those documents. But the most important thing you actually do when you submit your manuscript is to do I want to call it cover letter, but it really is, in this case, a cover email. So this is the email I said we submitted this morning in a YouTube live we did this morning. But here you can see Heather is our editor. And as you can see here, I write this very formal letter, and the different sections, and I even have headings in my email, are real important because what we have to get right here is Harleen and I have to submit the exact version of the correct documents that have all the sections to every chapter, all the front matter, everything needs to be in here. And this is my way of documenting what I handed them. And you can see there, I put the word count in there so that I can say, I gave this all to you. And so whatever I miss, we've documented it here in this email. So I need to get my half right. So it's very clear that I gave them all the parts that they needed up front. And so that, let's just say I forgot a chapter or two here and I wanted to add those, they would be able to, per our contract, charge me money for adding new material after this email. So I make it very explicit what I'm handing them and how, so that all of our boundaries are really clear. So as you can see here, I tell her what book I'm submitting. Seems obvious, but we want this. This is a legal document. We want it to be really clear. You'll see for the manuscript submission, I tell them that I have 18 Word docs because that is what they requested in their author instructions with one PDF file. And then I tell them what's in it, and especially for the front matter, because that can be a little vague. I tell them you know, it's the title page and the table of contents, but I also say that all the bios and the list of contributors are there, because they did give me a choice between putting the list of contributors in the front matter or in end matter. And I just put it all in the same place as we did in our last book with this publisher. So, but I'm telling them what's there. So I'm documenting what I'm giving them or what I think I'm giving them, so that when Heather goes through on her end, she's going to make sure, oh, yep, the editor and the list of contributors and the editor bios are there. Perfect. So she can make sure. So yes, it's in the document, and then I'm telling her what I'm giving her in the email, so that we have crystal clear communication about what is being given. I do say that there are 15 book chapters, and then I specify that there is artwork and that there are 2 separate files that go with the artwork. They ask the artwork be in its own file, so that's chapter 9.1 file, and then there is a PDF of the permission of the artist who did the artwork, so that they have that, and I've documented that that's what I'm giving them. And then, because this is an academic book, for each chapter we had to create abstracts, because when they get put into an academic database where people do searches, they needed those abstracts there, and we have to write those. And so I'm telling them it's there, it's in the format that they wanted. It's kind of a strange format, but I just do what they tell you. Do not argue, do not create your own format, just do what they tell you. So that's the actual manuscript, and those were the 19 files you saw just a moment before. Then I get into the permissions. This is really important. I say that I believe we've cited everything, and we've used what we've cited is fair use as far as we understand for academic publications. And I'm asking them very politely to, you do a double check, make sure we didn't violate any, copyright laws. You've got attorneys, I don't, please double check. So, and then again, I clarify that we do have artwork in just one chapter and that the permissions are attached. And so that's there. And yes, in this case, the editor did, we had a separate email exchange and she accepted it separately, but I'm still documenting that I've done it here in one place. So it's very clear what I have done. So if anything ever goes awry, it's all very clear what I did here, rather than having a whole bunch of different email streams all over the place. The author instructions said that we could choose whatever style we wanted. I just want to make sure we're doing APA style, let them know that. The American Psychological Association's writing format, and in academics, we have to do a lot of citations and references. So I say we're using that particular style. Even if you're not doing an academic book, you have to choose a style. So definitely talk with your editor before writing a book about how you're going to reference things. Because boy, I once had a publisher surprised me, and I had to take what was in APA style and put it in another style, which required me to go and get an exact page number, which I didn't have to do in APA. You only have to do that for direct quotes. So I spent literally several weeks trying to fix that. So always make sure you know what style you're working with. And then you'll see here that they asked for the word count in their instructions to authors. So I went ahead and gave them the word count for every single chapter. And again, what this does is it establishes, I handed you a file which had this many words in it. So this is the file that matches up with that. If ever anything goes wrong, we are crystal clear about what I handed them and what I didn't hand them. Because there is a contract that oversees all of this, and I'm documenting for the record that this is what I have done. These are my understandings, and so then at the end, since we will be working quite a bit with the editor over the next 6-8 months to get this thing into everyone's hot little hands, I just, always end with a politeness and gratitude to your editor, who does a lot of work that you hardly even know about or hear about on their end with the publisher. So that is, in a quick little nutshell, how you submit a book manuscript. Some tips. I hope you found this useful, and in terms of getting yourself published. So best of luck to you.